Um, so I hope you enjoy the afternoon, and I'd like to now ask Tina Cole to say a few words about her experience of judging the competition. I don't envy her the task because the overall quality of the entries was very, very, very high, I think, and I think Tina agrees with me. Tina.
Thank you, Derek. Hello, everyone. Welcome. And what can you say about judging a poetry competition? It's a privilege, I think, that you are sat down with more than 100, more than 150 people's writing, pieces of work that people have spent time and energy and thought and care about. And it's easy to say that you just read them and then you make a decision. But it isn't like that at all. Well, it wasn't like that for me, but I suspect everyone judges competitions in a different way. I was having a conversation with someone I know who's recently judged another competition who said, I made a grid and ticked it off. Well, I can assure you that wasn't the way I went about it. And be assured that I read every poem at least twice, every single one, if not 3 times. And then you get down to the number of poems that you like. You know, you kind of feel bad about dividing them up into A's and B's and all of any kind of quantitativeness is not good in my mind. And then you get down to that, though. You get down to, well, do I like this more than that? And then I got down to, well, why do I like this more than that? But certain poems just kind of stuck in my mind. They stuck in my head. They repeated themselves to me as I read them again. And I can say definitively that the poem that I chose as a winner was the poem I chose from the very first reading of all the poems. This was the one that stuck out for me from the very start. I'm a quite emotional writer. I like things that have heart and feeling. So I guess that's what I was looking for. I wanted something to speak to me in a loud and clear voice. Obviously, I wanted quality in the writing, but what the heck does that mean? It could mean anything, because it means different things to everyone sitting here, I'm sure, and different things for all people. As someone else said to me recently, poetry is a very broad church. It is indeed. And the worst bit of judging is having to select, having to say, this is better than this, which goes against the grain for me quite a lot. I find that hard because it's a creative art. You go in the National Gallery, you don't always go and look at Gainsborough's, do you? You go and look at all sorts of different things. You want that variety. But it's the things that speak to you, whether they're video installations, or it's a watercolor, or it's a sculpture. It's the things that shout at you and you think, yes, I really like that. And that's because you relate to it. It's simple as that. Something inside your emotional energy, it relates to you. So that's all it is, really. When I judged, it was just the ones that related, I found I related to and I liked the best. And I read them and read them and read them. Especially the ones that fell in the last sort of 30 or 40 or 50. They were read and read and read. Fortunately, it was nice weather when we had a few days of nice weather, so I sat outside reading them and reading them and reading them. So thank you all for allowing me to do that. It was a pleasure, a delight, a journey, and I really did enjoy it. So much variety and so many different voices. Yes, it was extraordinary. And I'm not sure what else I can say to you, because it was a great experience for me. I enjoyed it very much, and I'd be delighted to do it again and again, because it was such an joyous thing to do. And thank you to those of you who put yourself out there, because not everybody's willing to do that. You know, it is a challenge to put your writing out there, because someone else is going to translate it using a completely different vocabulary to you. but that's what they will do. So thank you for bringing your poems to my attention, and congratulations to the people who were winners or were considered to be in the running for being winners. Everybody's a winner because you've sat down and written something creative. And that's a very special thing. And I very much appreciated it. Thank you. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you very much, Tina, and thank you for giving freely of your time and your expertise. And you know, not everybody would do that, so thank you.
Welcome.
Our winner was Georgina Titmus, who can't be here today. Mainly, I get the impression because of technical problems. But she has made a recording, and I am going to attempt to play that recording to you. This is where I cross my fingers and hope for the best. I hope you can hear this when it starts.
I'd like to thank Tina for choosing my poem.
Can you hear that? Good.
And for her very kind words in her judge's comment. This is for a triumph. My grandmother on the back of a BSA, or a triumph. Bright-haired, she's laughing, in black and white, but her joy is pure colour, a charisma of colour. On the back of one of those old bikes, behind this guy, not my grandfather, who's wearing motorcycle gauntlets, like clumsy fur-lined oven gloves. She's pillion on a BSA, or a triumph, one of those old bikes, classic old bikes, and she's laughing, laughing, having fun. My gran. This is my take on the Cinderella story. Stepsisters. They made me wade, the fingering weed, the goose-fleshing badass sludge. Worser than spider, worser than worm, worser than the thing that plucks my duvet as I lie in terror waiting. Worser than school. Sink-sucking sediment, glass slippery toes, pumpkin ooze. They made me pay at midnight. And 2 poems from my bedsit days.
Derek, we've got too many here.
Breaking glass, 3 floors
Sorry?
up.
I think we've got too many here. Just
Oh, yes, it's a little, you mean the poems?
yes.
Yes, it's a little reading. There's a couple more poems.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
Sorry.
I beg your pardon, everyone.
Yeah, no, I should have said, I meant to say, but I didn't, that Georgina's giving a little reading of, I think she's got about another minute to go. I'll see if I can find.
1984. We hear the sound of breaking glass, 3 floors up in our rented room. Friday nights, Saturdays, screams. The landlord channels Rackman. Faulty electric heater, rigged coin meter, Warhol soup on a 1-ring hot plate, mildewed paranoia. We fear the sound of breaking lives, 3 floors up in our rented slum. Screams, diamond dog dreams. Sundays are quiet. Under the influence of Ursa Minor. On summer nights, driven from the mean room with its lean-to lav, by air that knew only a sordid breathing, we slouched streets, uncompromised by lamplight, for a fly-tipped mattress, an upholstered roadkill, to lie, side by side, mind by mind, narcotizing our earth-shattered dreams in the stars. Private viewing. You wanted to paint me nude. I said I'd tell my husband. I didn't tell my husband, as I knew what he'd think, what he'd say. I didn't tell my husband I didn't model nude, and now my likeness, perched on a stool, reclined in a chair, Nipples raw umber mixed with cerulean blue taunts your mind's eye and mine. A seagull. Like characters in a Chekhov play, we slight each other, fan ourselves, complain. A seagull, feathered adolescent grey, deflowers soft tarmac, entrails pressed into memory. Oh, this heat. Waking. Gasping, I surface from sleep-tossed seas, eyes a tide of tears. Standing at the cliff top where we pledged to meet in dreams. You take my hand, smile, and are gone. Thank you.
Want to say thank you, Georgina, but of course she's not here. So I'd like to have, we're going to hear the other prize winners and the highly commended now. I'd like to ask Jenna Plews to read her poem, Fox. Jenna.
Thank you, Derek. Fox. I don't need to touch you, stretched out there in the shade, your body soft as bog cotton, sinking into the smother of sedge and bramble. You lie as if you sleep, limbs fluid as rain, unmarked by disease or age. I know you are dead. That's how my mother lay, uncoiled at last, a finger to her lips. The spikes of pain flattened to an empty line, age and disease wiped clean. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Very, very moving. And I'd like to ask Alex Josephi to read her prize-winning poem, Calligraphy.
Thank you, Derek, and for organising all this. And thank you so much, Tina, for choosing my poem and liking it. Calligraphy. Visitors to Raynham Hall loved tracing the signature of John Harl, sea captain. Writing this with a white goose quill, you're waiting at the gate into my land. Blots sprout under the nib, stain the heel of your palm, confuse the signature you're trying to perfect. You know I'm out here, stepping easily across the border where this garden ends, the churchyard stones begin. I extend an invitation. Think of it as a seed that drifts in through the window where I used to stand, watching the wharf. You feel me take the pen, scratch ink across the page. I'm here in these branches, these swoops and lozenges, the bold strokes of my sensible North Country hand. And here, between one name and the other, I hesitate.
Thank you, thank you. I love that poem. I'm going to ask Nathan Coblentz now to read. Nathan is joining us. Oh, hello, Nathan. I can see you. Hi. Nathan is joining us from Sri Lanka, so there's quite a time difference. What's the time in Sri Lanka, Nathan?
Thanks, Derek. It's about 7 o'clock here.
Okay, right. Okay, so Nathan is going to read Burial Song for Brown Cat number 15, and I remember reading this when it came in, and it's a sestina, which are very difficult to write. Nathan.
So, Burial Song for Brown Cat number 15. We give her 2 verses of a hymn, then leave her in the hole I've dug. This ends the work that this one caused us, and now the ants we kept her from can have their turn. They'll remove her fleck by fleck, though God knows how they do it. In passing lines, they squeeze each other with the news like we squeeze the sadness from the child, saying, leave off crying now, this cat's gone to God like all the others. We still have such work with the ills of the living, and this one turned out okay if you consider how the ants on her first day here swarmed her. Thick red ants clamped along her spine. I had to squeeze them off with my fingernails because she couldn't turn her head, and the other cats knew well to leave a sacrifice alone. It was work keeping her alive, but this was God we'd found unwell beneath the cars. God in this cat approaching us the same way an ant follows a scent to its food or nest. New work began that day. What could we do but squeeze her in at home with all the rest? But leave her there, let it be someone else's turn, I'd thought, watching the future turn towards a duty I hadn't asked God to give. All I wanted was leave to sit in the garden and watch the ants bind their nests with the silk they squeeze from their mouth and let creation work itself out. I had not guessed how the work would become me or to what she would return. At the end, for her to breathe, we had to squeeze her like an accordion, praising God. Her collar a tambourine that tumbled ants like notes from the fur between my palms. So leave behind such talk of work. Listen, God writes this music. Return to yourself like the ants that squeeze back to their nest between the woven leaves.
Thank you very much, Nathan. That's a lovely poem. I think you told me that in Sri Lanka you have some rescue animals yourself.
Yeah, we have about a dozen cats and 3 dogs here, so it's a mini Lord Whisky sanctuary.
Marvelous. Thank you very much. And I'd now like to ask Tina Cole to read, for Philippa Hatton-Lapine to read A Winter Walk. I think Philippa is here, but she would like Tina to read the poem.
Hello, Philippa. You're happy for me to read this? Your lovely work? A Winter Walk. In the afternoon, when night comes, the rain is indecisive. I can smell the turn to snow. Waiting for its transformation is like whisking egg whites, watching for stiff peaks. I want to shout encouragement. I do believe in fairies. Push harder. You can do it. By the time I go out, the settling snow reflects a brilliant moon. I need no torch. Boundaries are redefined, echoes stolen. Only my careful footsteps interrupt the silence, punching like the first bite of an apple among the postcard houses. One is dark and half demolished. Its doors lean in the rising snow, as if waiting for bricks to grow around them. They closed for private conversations once, for secret present wrappings, opened many times in greetings, slammed in temper sometimes. Snow melting on my glasses as a ghost wandering inside. On the way home, my boots stamp out thoughts that will disappear by morning. Jaundiced lamplight welcomes me. Warm air burns thawing fingers. Tastes of tired dinners. The glow through the window, so white, it is blue.
Thank you, Tina. And Tina will now read another highly commended poem, Wild Geese by J.D. Sparks.
Wild geese. Communal urgency lifts them away from lake and land, pale feet trailing like small cold hands waving goodbye. Rising with unmistakable voice, exhortations to gather, appealing and answering the call and response of a kind. So, observed over field and farm, loose chevrons form, magnetically drawn together, indicating continental air. Below, we bear brief witness, their departure resonating, echoes perhaps of an ancestral urge to explore horizons, bestowing poignancy on the moment, brief significance, a chance reframing of constrained, over-obligated lives. As they fade away, some part of us leaves with them, idealizing freedom, still dreaming of metamorphic flight. Alone once more, we pause to grieve a vacant sky, our thoughts ephemeral clouds, imputing higher wisdom, suggesting loss is only temporary, foreshadowing reunion, and that whatever leaves us, in some sense, turns home.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you, JD Sparks, who can't be here, but I'll send him the recording. I'd like to ask Glenn Wilson now to read his poem, Ukrainian Soldier Cradles a Russian Blue.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you, Tina, for my poem. I'll just read this. Ukrainian soldier cradles a Russian blue. This used to be a school. I can tell only by the hopscotch markings in the yard. The buildings, all uneven blocks, no one has got round to sorting. Whole rows of them right down to the town limits. Everything is grey. Signage is veiled in dust. As if the town was spider-webbed entire, catching thoughts and flies. Our boots kick and crunch stones, and suddenly a yarl comes from our left. The cat's call comes clear as we move cracked slabs. She shivers herself out of the rubble, her back leg lame, her belly thin. She hesitates but moves towards us. I take off my gloves and lift her, pick the dust from her coat, stroke her back until she purrs, despite the sound of distant artillery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you very much. And oh, it's me. I'm going to read two poems by Michael W. Thomas, who unfortunately can't be here. And I'm rather looking forward to reading these. So the first one is called Get Me a Hat. Get me a hat. Sorry, get me a tissue. The Saturday city was bursting with scores of shoppers and bustlers. The fishmonger's roars looped the loop through the air like a springy-pawed cat. Then a voice wailed, "Make way, I'm in need of a hat." Down precincts and alleys, T-Rex thumped along, ignoring the crowds and the buskers' bright song. Through a speckle-glass doorway, he fell with a splat. "My wedding's at 3, he cried. "Get me a hat." Assistant screamed, fainted, or sizzled in shock as T-Rex swished his tail around the headgear in stock. But the manager, bold in a scarlet cravat, whispered, "Calm yourself, sir. We shall choose you a hat." T-Rex tried on Stetsons and Busbys and caps and huge Arctic efforts with ginormous flaps and toppers and bowlers and mortarboards flat. "I cannot be wed," he sobbed, "minus a hat." A deerstalker perched on his bony domed head, then trilbies and toques in gold sable and red. He gave a straw helmet a curious pat. Would the vicar, he wondered, object to this hat? The manager watched with growing despair as unsuitable titfers flew high through the air. Then he looked at his feet and considered the mats underneath. "Half a mo, dear sir. Here is your hat." To the back room he took it. The mat, for 10 minutes straight, came tearing and slicing. And lastly, a great big eureka. He came back in triumph. "Now that," he cried, twirling it round, "is your wedding day hat." It had Chinese pagodas and summer tree tails that would flutter like dreams down T-Rex's grand scales, and a brim like the wings of a sky-sailing bat. Your bride will be boggled. Go forth in your hat. The shoppers applauded, its busker sang shrill. From pub to cathedral, from river to hill, rang cheers, whoops and blessings, a joyous, how's that? For the wedding of weddings, T-Rex and the hat. So, I think marvelously successful comic poem. Thank you, Michael W. Thomas. And a second poem by Michael, Preprandial, which reminds me certainly of our cats. And if you've got cats, I think you'll recognize this ritual, this quirky ritual that cats often have. Preprandial. Strange how, for as long as she's been with us, our little cat has had to headbutt the kitchen radiator before she pilots down to her food. She's gentle about it. The way she wears her world after says no harm done, nothing punch-drunk in her house and shrub beelines to this or that consuming secrecy. I've tried moving the bowl elsewhere. She just looks at it, as you might look at a snail whose home breaks loose as it patterns time along its singular foot, or at a man who in the midst of a careening afternoon fumbles of a sudden any sense of who he is and simply stands amid the rackety footfall, a face of eye whites and bones pressing. So I put it back, and she obliges with her strange preprandial. Sometimes, as I listen to her clicks and crunches, I picture the last time I'll ever leave this house. After all the rains, appliance fugues, refettles, I wonder if the final thing I hear will be the shiver of a bump as a space that was a head bears down on a space that fueled the set-me-up for another day's mystic journey beyond the flailing swipe of words. So that was Preprandial by Michael W. Thomas. And our cats have lots of strange rituals, don't you? They're asleep. Okay, I'd like to ask Terry Jones to read Post-it Notes. Are you there, Terry?
I am here. Thanks very much, Derek, and hello, everybody. Post-it notes. One day, my kitchen walls will be patched with post-it notes of things that might have slipped my mind. The whereabouts of dishes, necessary actions, cues and orders drafted not by me, but by my daughters, who do not want me locked out of my house or burning up dry kettles. They are praising the ever-reversible glue that they can press and then peel back in this interlude, where puzzlement does not leave me tearful, and before builders come and chip at the plaster, unhinge the doors, unglaze the windows, so that cold draughts can roam through the edifice unhindered.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you so much. And I'd now like to ask Olivia Walwyn to read Stowaway Hedgehog. Olivia.
Hello. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Tina. A stowaway hedgehog. Sheltering from the storm, she took to our house, nuzzled for quiet in amongst purple cloud-bruised walls, the carpet's violet sheen, settled there while the door closed like a brush through hair. I found her rioting sometime in the midnight black, The room stank of her soil. The door rattled with dazed attempts as the thunder crashed. I gathered her in a towel, quills through the cotton layers, ushered her to the yard and left her there, to glimpse the last of her uncoiling towards the open gate, surprisingly quick and nimble, soft in the rain-slicked wet, pattering like a heart, finding its rhythm once again.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Thank you. And finally, in this section, I'd like to ask Adam Elms to read The Old Men in the Library.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you, Tina. Now, this was a 20-minute scribble on the top of a bus, so I'm very surprised it got anywhere, to be honest. This is called The Old Men in the Library.
Keep that a secret.
Between transport and health, local history, modern languages and film, snow-capped dawdlers shamble. Worker ants in threadbare jumpers, stooping to inspect parades of literary soldiers, drinking in the choice, nodding. They scrawl notes upon corrugated sheets, keep inventories, surmise, diarize, theorize, thumb eagerly through German dictionaries and telephone directories and biographies of prime ministers and cuttings from the Western daily press, beavering with a fervor unabashed. They bathe in time, and yet time slowly tilts her face away. A chain of oily cotton mops and tattered raincoats, drinking in the detail, nodding. One sits alone in the deserted cafe, runny egg eyes and humpback bridge lips, a pack of Waitrose bags idling at his feet, carving a mango with razor precision, strip-like bounding from his unsheltered dome. He'll be here tomorrow. New mango, new page on the pad, same whetted knife, drinking in the warmth and nodding. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you. Well, that was a very productive bus journey. Right. When I was organising this competition, some people emailed me and said, thank you for all the work you do at the Sanctuary. Well, my sister will tell you that I don't do any work at the Sanctuary. I do organise the poetry competition, but otherwise I'm not particularly active. But Margaret has done all her life, has done a fantastic amount of work for animals. And I hope, there might be a problem with the network, with the internet connection, hope that Margaret will talk to us for a few minutes about the work of the Sanctuary. Margaret, you're muted at the moment. Did you know? No. You're mute. Yep, that's it.
All right.
Yes, that's fine.
Yes, that's fine. Okay. Well, first of all, I would like to begin to thank all the poets who entered the competition. It was a great honour to judge them. I found a lot of them, or all of them, more or less, very, very moving. And I felt that a lot of time, and they'd all been written from the heart. It was really lovely to read them. My sincere thanks go to Tina Cole, who was the judge of the open competition, and giving her time. Thank you very much, Tina, for that. And to my brother, Derek Sellen, for all his hard work in putting it all together. And you never know, I might get him helping at the sanctuary walking the dogs yet. At the moment, it's a bad time for animals, mainly due to the cost of living. People made homeless, the cost of food, and the expense of vets fees, and also the shortage of vets, especially in Kent. As many of you know, we run a clinic for people on low income, and we are struggling to find vets to cope with the demand. Although on average, we treat over 250 animals a week that probably otherwise wouldn't be treated. We have a long waiting list of animals needing homes, and we take in as many as we can, but it's just a drop in the ocean. We hope that the government would do more to enforce chipping the dogs, because so many dogs come into us that are chipped and they're not registered properly. And this means we can't trace where they come from or the breeders who are bringing them into the world. And until this is done, I can't really see anything improving, and we won't be able to improve the temperament of dogs, because it's so important that when the puppies are socialised properly, and in these breeding kennels, unfortunately, it's not done or not possible for them to do it. Nevertheless, we find wonderful homes for many animals, for horses and goats as well, and small animals, rabbits, guinea pigs, etc. We're very, very grateful for everybody who supports us, and thank you for your support and being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret. And if anybody wants to make an extra donation to the sanctuary, you can do it via the Lord Whisky website. Right, we have all the way from Italy, Susie Clare, who won the rescue section of the competition. And I'm going to ask Susie now to read us her winning poem and a few other poems of hers. Susie, are you there?
Yeah. Am I?
Yep.
Have you unmuted me?
Yep. You're there. You're wonderful. Yep. We can see you.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you. Well, it's lovely to be here. Thank you very much. I'm sorry about the name on my picture, but Uta is my very kind friend who set up the Zoom meeting for me. So it's not me. She isn't me. Okay. My gratitude to Margaret as well for choosing my poem as the winner and for highly commending the other one. A Miracle Dog Called Bimba, which is the one that won, is obviously a true story. Sad beginning, happy ending, luckily. So, a miracle dog called Bimba. They won't remember her now, the locals who chased her away when she trespassed in gardens with light feet, heavy heart, slipping herself through prosecuting railings to nose meager crumbs shaken from tablecloths, who threw stones when she stole footwear carelessly left outside, chewed the leather to edible pulp. They won't remember calling on the mayor to intervene, to save their shoes, the tin of chappie he sent with empty words, shod with empty smiles. They won't remember the pitiful ball of fur in shades of strained grey, scraggy tail wrapped round to her nose, curled under a hedge next to a funeral pile of tiny birds' bones, neatly cached for later. They won't remember dismissing her as too ugly to count. They won't remember me arriving every day with chicken and mince, or later with my dogs. Won't remember the vet with his blowpipe and dart to get her into my car. Won't ever know how she licked my forehead when I squatted, hands behind my back. How she slowly let herself show her true nature. How she fitted herself to Scamp, always following his cue, always my shadow. And the one that Margaret kindly, highly commended was called New Dog on the Block, a little more light-hearted. New Dog on the Block. There's magic in the air when Spot comes spanking along, basking in the boost to his street cred, a new mistress smitten by his choose me face behind kennel bars, skewed ear, punk fur spiking up as if his tail's been stuck in a socket. He's no corker, that's for sure. His skinny spindle shanks wouldn't win him a Rosetta Crufts. But fair dues, he's definitely got a Keith Richards kind of sex appeal and a fetching black circle round his left eye. Queenie sits at the window, chest braced against the pane, rump draped over the sill like marshmallow suns, waits, eyes peeled, for this new beau of hers to come a-wooing and spray his devotion on the nearest tree. He struts to the gate where they usually frisk and flirt, pricks up his good ear, looks straight at her with a twitch of his tail, lifts his leg, and she knows from the abundance of his billets doux that after all, he loves her best. Okay.
Thank
The
you.
next one I'd like to read from my collection is another animal poem about a fox that used to live in the wood behind our house, and she used to lie just over the other side of the fence and smirk at my dogs as they barked at her. The vixen thinks she's safer close to town, doesn't know about the crones in shawls and clogs, secrets tucked in pinafore pockets, smug as grenades. Eventually, these matrons will stumble on ruffs of bloody quills, a half hen left for later, and men with guns and dogs will stomp through the wood, lifting tiny kites of brown and green. In the light burst from my torch, her eyes are holes in autumn leaves. I whisper my bewares into a night that's slick with silence now. This is another animal poem that I wrote after seeing a documentary on the television about racing camels in Saudi Arabia in the 1980s. Tayara, the racing camel. It's almost time. She sniffs the change in the air, day cooling to dusk, yanks her tether in mischief, flicks her tail at fat and fecund flies. It's time. She nuzzles the boy when he comes, sharing breath as he rests his cheek on her muzzle, where the skin's soft as apricot, calming her to kneel for the satin saddle behind her hump, the straps velcroed round her belly, his legs on her ribs. She jerks upright, steps to the mark, all muscle and bone, haunches like Scottish hills. Butterflies fidget in her stomach as she waits for the starter's shout, the downswipe of his stick. When it comes, she bursts from the line, sand nipping at her hooves, a collage of open mouths in the stands. The boy hangs on for dear life, buttocks thudding to her rhythm, wind gibberish in his ears, chanting his mantra. She doesn't need his prayer or the switch in the air. She's a camel with speed in her blood, a legend in the making. Those who remember still say she ran for joy. And I'd just lastly like to read this one, which is one of the poems chosen for the Thresh Press anthology called The Power of the Feminine Eye. And it's called Butter and My Father. Butter and my father. My father left me an unfamiliar self. Back then, I cursed him to kingdom come. I wanted the father-daughter thing, like the ringleted child attached to him in photos, the cozy fatty acid snacks before bed growing up. I still had the questions I couldn't ask and he wouldn't have answered, like, for instance, what he did in the Arab desert, since surely there was more to his war than the eco-friendly operations of dung beetles. Why he gave up singing, why he kissed that tart at someone's Christmas party, why he did what he did. Wherever he is, heaven or someplace in between, we can't negotiate with words. So for starters, I want to give up talking to him as if he might reappear. I want to enjoy small pleasures, enjoy how, when I'm peckish after a night out and take the Lurpak from the fridge, I remember that him, back from the pub, bricklaying butter onto slabs of bread. How he leaned on the mantelpiece, casting the cast in his eye on me, his grin that said, more for me, knowing I'd take a slice. And always mother sulkily asking if he liked bread with his butter, and him looking as if it wouldn't melt in his mouth. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susie. And that's a lovely way to bring the first half to an end. So we'll have a 5-minute break. The cats are looking as if they'd like me to feed them, so it might be a bit longer than 5 minutes, but thank you. I'll pause the recording, and I'll also... So, we are back. Whoops. Yep. I hope everybody's back. There's a few blank screens, so I'll just wait a moment to. Yes, it's not quite 15:15. Okay, so I'm now going to ask Tina herself, Tina Cole, the judge of the open competition, to read some of her work to us. Tina, as you probably know, is a poet and reviewer who has led workshops with both adults and children. She has won a number of national poetry competitions, including the Yaffle Press Prize in 2020, which is something I've tried to win but never succeeded. So, well, congratulations, Tina. Her second collection was Forged, published by Yaffle Press, which focuses on themes of Black country heritage and generational trauma. And if that sounds a bit dry, it's actually a marvelous collection, and I thoroughly recommend it. And I hope Tina will put a link to it, or at least something about that collection in the chat. And her published poems have been published widely in magazines, in The Guardian, and in many poetry collections. And it says here she has just finished an MA in creative writing poetry at Manchester University. That was a few months ago now, so maybe not she has just, but she did finish. I've always enjoyed Tina's poetry as long as I've known it, so I'd like to ask her now to give us a reading of some of her work. Tina.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you for that introduction. As Derek's just said, my previous collection was called Forged, which was about my Black country heritage, really, kind of focused on the physical landscape and the characters of my heritage. And I have a new book that will be out before the end of the year, which will be called What It Was, which also sounds equally daunting, but I assure you it isn't going to be. But it's perhaps more about an emotional landscape than a physical one. I like to write about people, about characters, and the sort of emotional dynamics that binds us together. And also I've done a lot of work recently on generational trauma, because it's quite a simple thing to write about what happened to me, but actually there's always a long history of why that's come about, usually through many generations. So this new collection is going to try and tackle that a bit more head on. I'm just going to read 3 poems. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, I won't be there for too long. So the first one I'm going to read you is called How to Reconstruct Female Ancestors. You must begin with the right kind of skin. Rhinoceros, elephant, a mouth to roll flat vowels, a kettle boiling temperament. Eyes too are important. Deep blue denim, pale blue dusk. Strong hands that can make sixpence turn its face to a shilling. Wrap up bygone disasters in fish and chip news. Keep plates spinning. Define the fingers, callous, red blistered from strangling stains, arms closed to possibilities. Fists more crooked than clenched must be able to grasp brushes, dish rags, brooms, as if lives depended on them. Move on to legs, leal-stockinged, bunion-footed, silly, short, sturdy little legs, made for standing in queues, bus stops, made for carrying the heft of a household. Feet that understand how to measure each step, dance the tarantella. Forget the torso. There is no need to know about the unwanted ones. The gin purged, tin bath soaked, blood shucked in a bucket. Shawl wrapped bodies with shoulder slanting signals. Focus on their ability to navigate lino edges, curtain hems, pegged hearthrugs, neatly set tables for afternoon tea, and end with the back, a slab, hunched, defiant. Move on to this next one's, thank you. This one's called On Monday at the Laundrette. On Monday at the Laundrette, a famous poet was counting out change, pushing sentences into the open porthole, a miniature parcel in the slot. It's the only way to do poetry, she said. I was amazed. Words tumbled about, letters realigned. It seemed so easy. She muttered to herself about the shame of sanitary towels, ketchup stains, women's rights. A machine of floating roos of redemptive foam. It could have been dandruff, snow, or one of those Christmas globes where a glitter life always settles back to the centre. I thought of Grandma's wash days, the heaped cotton froth in a wicker basket, pegging out, great wallops of wind filling the body of work shirts and boiled wool combinations. Her hands carbolic burned, thin as red frost. Then chose a machine, dialed the temperature to volcanic in the hope that those old stories might shrink or dissolve like a soluble aspirin, leaving behind something frivolous and bubble light. Lately, I have been thinking about laundering my own skin, hoping for full restitution. I could watch as it coalesces parts worth saving, fibres winding and spinning into a clump of the everyday ordinary. Make plans based on a better template. Outside the rain is biblical, fog dancing on steamy windows. pounding pavements until gutters gurgle the day into a kind of new. The poet fumbles her words in hot air, folds pages into a neat collection. Grandma pushes the dolly tub back into the past. I shrug the shroud of my future self out of the dryer. And this one's called Let's Meet. Let's meet somewhere outside time and space. Let's meet between the phoenix and her ashes on an evening when the sky paints the sea in citrus and lime and tides rule the moon. Let's meet in a garden tumultuous and pungent with colour, where we engage with the voices of poplar trees and make beautiful silence together. Let's float inside a bottle of vintage Veuve Clicquot in that moment of smile, not smile, on the dark side of a distant world, inside walls that smell of something hidden beneath red flop wallpaper. Slip inside a moleskin coat, pockets filled with Sobrani cocktail cigarettes, arms made of smoke. Let's get whipped up at the marriage of strawberries and cream, while headlights reflect garnets and pirate treasure in puddles on psychedelic tarmac. Let's meet when the caucus race has only just begun and Alice has Prozac in her pocket. Take a trip as the year prepares to wane, as the planet implodes. Let's light a candle and whisper a fierce prayer for each flame, for each other. Let them linger on the eyelashes of china dolls, beneath the feathers of flightless birds, inside great Aunt Maud's satin corset, whose silken cords are unravelling, allowing her to breathe, to allow us to finally speak similar language.
Thank you very much, Tina. Thank you. And we're going to go on now to the second and third prize winners in the rescue category. So I'd like first to ask Kirsty Harper, who I think I saw earlier with a very nice cat on her screen.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Kirsty.
Okay. Thanks very much for having me and for inviting me to be part of this event. I've put a drawing on my screen, which I was planning to leave while I read my poem. Is that okay?
That's absolutely fine. Is it your own drawing?
That's my own drawing, yes.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Okay.
Yep.
Paw prints. I left my paw prints in the garden today, one that I visited every day. I never gave up hope of something to eat, nor of a new home to provide my keep. I left my paw prints in the garden today, the path I created as I walked every day. A gentle reminder of never giving up hope, of your dream and your right of somewhere to sleep at night. I never gave up hope of a forever home as I sat on the patio at night alone. And when it was time for something to eat, I walked my path again. I had a special place to eat. And before I ate and after being fed, I'd give my thanks first with the rub of my head. When the cat flap was open, I sidled inside and sat in the corner and tried to hide. And then the memories came flooding back. I remembered what it was like to be a house cat. I left my paw prints in the garden today as I was put in a box and travelled a new way. I visited the dentist and had breakfast and dinner to eat. I relaxed and allowed them to provide my keep. I'm on a new journey to a forever home, to a place and a person I can call my own. And now I will have a voice. My forever home will give me a choice. I can roam in the garden if I choose, but the door will be open after I've enjoyed the views.
Thank you, Kirsty. Thank you. And I'd now like to read for Fern Adams, who I don't think is here. I'm going to read her poem, Shep. We spoke different languages, at least in the beginning. You knew harsh words, hard fists, could read a bottle like a pro, knew at what measurement to hide. To me, people were a puzzlement. I couldn't find a predictability, hadn't yet learned how to respond. Together, we rebuilt our own Babel, created one language that suited us well, staccato taps of paws and feet became the sound of happiness, dancing out rhythms on the kitchen floor. That matched not a song, but our mood. A squeak of a toy, an encouragement to get moving. Coats, human and canine, drying in front of the fire. Our conversation about a day well spent. The silent companionship of a dog and their person. When you left, our language did too. No letters of muddy paws or verbs of walking joy. And yet our language was not extinct, for you had left dictionary entries everywhere. Messages of delight enclosed in favourite places. A cloth rabbit under the sofa spoke of care. You taught me the dialect of friendship and left it for when the time was right for me to pass it on, ready for the pause that would one day follow yours. So that was Shep by Fern Adams. And I'd like to ask Danielle Green now to read her very highly commended poem in the rescue section, Cher Ami. Danielle?
Yes, thank you. So Cher Ami is about a war pigeon. Cher Ami was the most famous war pigeon in World War One, and he actually saved countless lives. They think hundreds of lives, because he was flying from. They were all stuck in the bunkers, and they sent him up, and he delivered a message. They were being shot at by friendly fire, the Allied troops, and he delivered a message saying, "For God's sake, stop it." And that actually saved lives of hundreds of men. But he was shot, and he still delivered this message even though he was shot. And then he was actually brought back. They tried to save him. They brought him back on the boat, and he died, unfortunately. So Cher Ami is actually stuffed, and he's in the Smithsonian Museum. And I needle felt, so this is just pretend this is Cher Ami in the Smithsonian Museum, and pretend I'm a pigeon. So this is from his best friend seeing him in the museum and thinking, oh, he's back. You know, the pigeon doesn't realize that he's stuffed. So just willing suspension of disbelief. Cher Ami, which means dear friend in French. Cher Ami, my dearest friend, I hear you're coming home again. Shall I bring you out for the pain? Whisky, gin, or cocaine? I see you copped it pretty bad, full of holes and lost a leg. But don't fret, I hear these days they do great things with pegs. Cher the hero who survived the 100 days, saved the day, saved 194 men. That's what the papers say. Cher Ami, you don't say much. Are you too spent to coo? Peck once for yes, twice for no. Flap your wings or even moo. For God's sake, Cher, you need self-care. Your feathers are a mess. Your chest is flat, your rump is bare. It's clear you're under stress. I've known you since a squeaker. Why won't you blink or look at me? Too good now with your croix de guerre and medals of bravery. Living it up on your pedestal behind this wall of glass with your eyes of glass. Oh, Cher, did you already pass? Cher Ami, my dearest friend, you're never coming home again. To think you died at just 1 year, To think of all the pain, to think of what you sacrificed. 20,000 pigeons died playing mailman on the front line for those so-called allied men who call themselves humane. Yet what did we pigeons gain? Freedom, glory, respect? No, not even a bowl of grain. And now they call us rats with wings, crush our eggs and kick our nests, train raptors to terrorize us so we can never rest. Cher ami, you should have left them hanging on the wire. You should have let those frontline pigs push them into the mire. For heaven's sake, stop it. Your fatal last note had read, why is it always the innocent who wind up shot and dead?
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Marvellous. I'm going to read Tommy now by Irene Wright. Tommy. Wise dog, in choosing not to show your speedier side for profit and greed, till rescue came from kinder hands who nurtured you until we met and fell in love. A family under the spell of your grace and those black beseeching greyhound eyes, then the rough lick of your tongue, the raising of your paw in trust, and we were smitten. You were coming home with us to claim your place in our hearts, entwine yourself in our lives. All-out sprinter to sofa-hugging sleepyhead, napping on your back, legs in the air, sensitive to each of our needs with a cuddle, a snuggle to soothe. You brought purpose and joy to our lockdown walks, easing our stress with much-needed fun as you played, when excitement would mount and you'd whirl like a dervish as zoomies took hold. You were made for those moments between sleeping and love. Your devotion shows as you lean against our legs as we stroke you, blessing the day you chose us. So that was Tommy by Irene Wright. She mentioned zoomies. We've got a 20-year-old cat who still does zoomies, don't you, Malcolm? Is Sarah Glover here? I'm not sure I've seen Sarah. I don't see her, and I'm afraid I don't have her poem prepared to read. But I do have The Rescue by Christine Tainch, if I pronounce that right. And Christine would like me to read this. The Rescue. Mid-January, and life was in monochrome. Colour had drained down the page in a watercolour mistake, in white, sepia and grey, like mottled shreds of old photographs. The sky split hailstones as if from a crick in its neck, feeling sharp as a gull's beak, the wind pushing against me like a difficult child. Getting away from the meeting had been as hard as cracking flint, pouring reassurance into the lap of anxious parents, willing their sons and daughters to be Leonardo's offspring. Tiredness seeped through me like grit through ice. Choosing a side road, strangely less snow-laden, and motoring with infinite slowness, I almost missed it, that basket by the road, the whimpering softness of an abandoned pup, fear overwhelming him with an almighty shiver, a terrible trembling, and a love that had been lost to others was now found in me. Of course I took him home, wouldn't you? Thank you, Christine, for that poem. And wonderful lines. We're now going back to the open competition, and I'm very pleased to welcome Barry Tempest, who I've known quite a few years now from Poetry on the Lake, and Barry is going to read his poem, his commended poem, The Poet's Garden.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you for both inviting me and all the work you've done to make this possible. The Poet's Garden. The poet's garden is not well kept. There are no straight lines, and the tangled hedge, the daisy-studded lawns have long been left unclipped. No weed killer has been sprayed on dandelion heads or thistles, where bumblebees busily bustle, and the garden path is grass, unpaved. Wasps sting, gnats bite, thorns prick. Rats enjoy the apple tree's shade. Green stems grow thick, and brambles weave a dense stockade. Not all is as you'd wish, but still, you certainly may wonder where you will. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you very much. The next poet on the list is John Gallus, who's a wonderful poet. But unfortunately, he's not here. At the last moment, he had another engagement, and I don't have his poem to hand to read. So I'd like to ask Tina Cole now to read a poem by Jane Bonnyman. Jane Bonnyman has entered the competition, I think, since the first one. So I'm always pleased to see her name on the listed poets. Tina.
Thank you, Derek. This is called Giant Water Bug, which I liked because I've written a poem very similar on the same theme. Giant Water Bug. You're the shadow behind all of us, lurking in corners, plundering pools. Your body is a shield, a plum stone. Forelegs are billhooks with needle tips. You take out fish, turtles, a small bird, and guzzle life as a day job, like sucking marrow from your bone. In your grip, a toad deflates like a toy and sinks into the mud. Aquatic dementor, magnified tick. You're the rough shark of the creek until the heron dives into shallows and locks you in its beak, or the snake skitters through cord grass and plucks you from silt, and the game plays on. A frog sits on a maple trunk, stuffing flies into its mouth, tiny thumbs.
And Tina will now read Leap of Faith by Anita John.
Leap of faith. Synchronized streams of the sky, impossible to count. They weave their aerial dance, high-octane blades scything daredevil close to the wing flick of others, bound almost never to land, but to fly, fly, fly most the days of their lives, through wind, sun, sleet, rain, higher than drone or small plane, through the briefest of moments of mating, there where the air is thin enough to fall, falling only to anchor their eggs on the solid structure of gable end and eave, strange to their touch as oceans are to ours, until the first fledglings fling themselves out and down into the element that holds them, the element in which they will feed, drink, preen, play, sleep, sweep, scream, the element that will bring them here, high above the houses of New Castleton, this flight of swift, so fast and wild and free.
Thank you, Tina, for reading that. Leap of Faith by Anita John. And finally, we come on to the highly commended poets of the rescue competition chosen by Margaret. I think Julia Wallace is here to read her poem, Loki.
Thank you, Derek. Loki. Who named you god of mischief, then filled you full of fears? Who riddled Norse venom through your soul and selflessness, leaving a husk that's slow to trust and fast to feed any food, any time? Early now, you climb into my lap, rest your nose moist against my shoulder blade, wriggle your rear as if you were making a hollow in the sand, then melt into my body with a shuddering sigh. Your eyes close, breathing slows, you twitch your nose. You snuffle, snore, flick eyelids, tremble toes. I deep breathe calmness into your core, confidence and promises of never missing a meal, never having to fight for food or a soft, warm place to sleep safe. I butterfly massage your smooth, warm flank to keep the night terrors away. Mind meld that I will keep a dog and bark myself, that it is my role to see off dangers, thrusting you behind imaginary skirts and facing your demons akimbo. I inhale the sanctuary of home and exhale all your years of fears and hurts. All this is your place, safe from noisy bins, fireworks, brushes, and still unknown terrors. From unwelcome dogs stalking past your gates, breathing the strength I send you. There's nothing in the world I can't make better. Breathe, breathe, sleep. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Very moving poem. Thank you. The next two poems are by Liz Hayward, who can't be here today, so I'm going to read them for her. The first one is called Finding Pip. No more border collies. That's the one rule I have today. But the photo of Pip in the book of the dogs was hard to flip past. He'd been seized, not a stray. We returned to the image, and his heart was lost. But not mine. But the training, the hours, the staring, the shedding, the rules. We'd been here before. How about a staffy or an Afghan hound or a doughy-eyed Labrador? I'd like to see Pip, he said to the lady, and she looked confused and unsure. Pip, you say? You sure you'd want him? He's been here a year, rehomed once before. But he is somebody that we all adore. This strident little being came into view, fervently pulling, alert and keen to be free. It was at that point that I absolutely knew that this little person was coming home with us, my soft-hearted husband and me. He had the biggest ears in the whole wide world, to be honest, more like satellite dishes. His eyes pleaded, try me. His nose, black and shiny, a fully realized checklist of all our wishes. Border collies are family. I once heard that said, and Pip was now our family, him and our Fred. And the next poem, I believe, is called Fred, also by Liz Hayward. And a sad poem, I'm afraid, but also joyful in the joy in describing Fred. As a person who likes a chunky dog, I did not have a lurcher in mind. When just days after George the dog had died, I found myself lagging behind, staring at truly the most beautiful face with a heart shape around his eyes and the noodle-type legs and the glockenspiel ribs. Someone else had clearly eaten the pies. So this dog came to live with us. And while ultimately rejected, Simon would have suited him well. This gentle soul, this generous boy, came to be called Fred and filled our lives with joy. I was not at all ready for the thieving of food and the endless weeing on sockets, but he taught the snappy game and we laughed at him so much with his inquisitive searching of pockets. He was liquid when running, and one of his jobs was to keep all the gulls off the beach. He took this job seriously and ran all the hours as the gulls just kept out of reach. My Fred was a dreamboat. I wasn't prepared for the depth of my complete adoration. Me sitting, him standing. He would lean on my side, lay his head on my shoulder and stare into my eyes. most handsome dog in all of creation. At the young age of 12, on a Monday night, he went outside for a wee, finally, but he screamed as he jumped and lost use of his legs. And crying and panicked, we went to the vets, not sure how injured he would be. He wasn't a stoic or resilient soul, as his very best friend Pip had been. And there, all alone in the vets without us, he gave up and couldn't have seen any light at the end of the tunnel he was in. So he left us at the vets, like Flynn. Sorry. And I'd like to ask Charlotte Oliver now to read her poem, Winged.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Winged. Come here, poor damaged creature, you who flew, could choose to soar away from all that's cruel, but now are left to scrat in fag-end grit, maligned, attacked, iron-spiked, outcast, and yet your bruised grey feathers are infused with pearl, like oil on puddles, iridescent whirls. Come here, and I'll cocoon you in soft hands. I'll soothe your twitches until silken smooth. I'll feed you, treasure you. I'll be your friend, and we will not know loneliness again. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautifully read. Thank you. And I'm going to read Healing the Healer by Jackie Fisher. Yes. Healing the Healer. The heavy glass doors silently slid shut behind her as she stepped out into the cold, dark night. Pausing for a moment, she fastened her hood against the wind while her eyes adjusted to the dim, misty light. As she slowly walked across the rain-swept hospital car park, a familiar figure, her colleague, came into sight. Managing a cheery wave and a smile, she called out, "Good luck with your shift. You'll need it, all right." Avoiding the puddles, she headed to the sanctuary of her car. Exhausted, she got in and wearily closed the door. Alone at last, she could let go as the tears came rolling down her cheek. Now she didn't have to pretend to be strong or brave anymore. For a few moments, she sat shivering, tearful, and too tired to drive. Images flashing through her mind as they had done before. There was always one that got to her, and today it was the old lady with the blue eyes and that sad look she wore. Those sad, frightened blue eyes haunted her as she sat in her car, and the frail hands that had clutched hers so tightly. Pulling herself together, she knew she had to head for home. She wiped away the tears and turned the engine key. Once home, she was met by an excited bundle of soft brown fur. Her little rescue dog jumped up, tail wagging furiously. She flung down her bag and scooped the dog into her arms, her spirit lifted by his little face, so full of love and glee. Gradually, the image of the old lady's sad face and blue eyes faded away, replaced by the dog's deep brown eyes, looking at her so lovingly. The warm tongue, licking her hand, wiped away the memory of those hands, those frail hands that had clutched hers so desperately. Safely home, now she could unwind and put the day behind her. Time to sink into a chair and relax with a hot cup of tea. She hugged the dog tightly, burying her face in his fur, and said, "My darling, once I rescued you, and now you rescue me." Again, about the power of rescue dogs. And this will be the last poem because My Cinnamon by Jules Gray. Jules Gray hasn't replied to my email, so I'm not going to read her poem, but I will read Unwanted by June Fox. Unwanted. An advert in the newsagent's window caught my eye. Home wanted for a small terrier. Enquire within. Should I? Sally was black, rough-haired, suspicious, snappy. Yet. The door slammed shut on her past as we walked away. She growled at everyone, slunk away from men. Yet, with patience and careful handling, in small, unhurried steps, we built her trust until the day she turned a corner and did not turn back. She regained a lost puppyhood, was playful and happy, a much wanted, much loved family pet. So that is the last poem. Sorry, I was changing the view. Last poem for today's celebration of your poems and the poems of everyone who entered the competition. I'd like to thank you all for coming. It's been a bit of a marathon of poems, but I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for sticking with it. Thank you very much to Susie from Italy for coming all that way. And thank you to Tina for judging the competition and for the reading and for reading some of the people's poems. And thank you to Margaret for telling us a little about the sanctuary. And thank you to everyone. Thank you to the animals who inspired some of those poems. I hope there will be another Lord Whisky Sanctuary Poetry Competition next year. And I hope many of you would like to enter. And do I have anything else to say? Tina's put details about how to obtain her book in the chat. And I know that Jenna Plews has, I'm not sure if Jenna's still here. Oh, yes, there you are. I'm top right. Jenna Plews has several publications, and you can always contact people through me. So I'll leave the meeting open for a little while. Feel free to go, but I will leave it open in case people want to chat to each other or say anything. So I'm going to stop the recording. So thank you very, very much for a lovely afternoon. I hope you found it lovely.
Thank you,